So, Esther Stamp, I am delighted to welcome you to the podcast. And we've been in email correspondence for really quite a few months.
Yeah.
And I actually thought it was best if you introduced yourself so you could tell our listeners who you are.
Okay, my name's Esther. I am married to Darren and I've got 3 children, Poppy, Declan and Joel, and we live in the Northwest.
Lovely. And my question to all my guests is, what is a particular challenge you are facing or have faced?
We have been facing and still are facing a little bit, dealing with the repercussions of my husband being accused of sexual offences against a child in his care when he was working as a teacher.
Gosh, can I just pause that? Because that sounds, that's a lot just in that your husband was accused of sexual offences to a child that he was teaching at the local school.
Correct.
I don't know where to go with that. So, I mean, the shock of it.
Yeah. Well, there was a massive extra level to the crisis was that my children, our children, not just my children, our children were also attending that school. So how it all came about wouldn't be the kind of the normal way of, if that happened to other people, you would expect the police to be at your door. But how it happened to us was that I was collecting my children from the school where he works, and I got intercepted by the head teacher and taken to his office where there were police officers.
Oh my goodness.
And it was really
shuddery.
Yeah.
Does that bring it back in your body as you remember?
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Hear it in your voice, like.
Yeah, and I think my recollection of it mostly was not knowing where my children were, because if you imagine you're just going to go pick them up at the door, just really normal, and I'd seen another school mum, so we had kind of met at the gate. We're just
had
pottering,
had
a little chat, pottering along, going to get our children, and then bam, intercepted. Wow. And he just said, "I need you to come with me straight away." And
and that tone of voice.
Yeah, you just think, what's happened? I actually thought that one of my children had done something. Yeah. I never in my mind thought of Darren. I never thought it would be anything to do with Darren at all. And actually, firstly, they brought me into a room with Darren, who was just barely breathing, and he said, I haven't done anything. And I said, okay. And then they took me to the police in the office, who then said, we're not doing anything right at this moment, but what you have to do in the next hour, I still have no idea why it was an hour, but in the next hour you need to find somewhere for Darren to live, because when this happens, the standard procedure is that they are not allowed to be in the company of children, including their own children, unsupervised, which then means that they can't stay over they can't live at your house. So that was the first thing that I had to figure out.
Can I pause you there?
Sure, yes.
I mean, so he was accused.
Yeah.
You saw him and he said, this really isn't true. Then you were taken separately. And when there's what is it, an accusation, or what's the term for it?
An allegation.
Allegation made against someone who works with children or is in relationship with children, any children, they are not allowed to have any contact with their own children or any children, although there is nothing that's proven. It's an allegation, right?
Correct.
And so you had an ordinary day, and then in minutes your husband was potentially a paedophile.
Yeah.
And you had to find him somewhere to live. And I can see you kind of looking sad and shocked. And
I think it was just your whole world in the space of an hour and a half on that day was just changed forever. It was like someone had just dropped a bomb on our lives.
Yeah.
And I think it was a shock because they very much give you things that you have to do right away. So you've got to be kind of focused.
On it,
yeah. So this is what you have to do. I remember saying, before we carry on, where are my children? Because I think in the back of my mind, I was thinking, have you got them? Has social services got them? Like, where
have you taken them away from me?
Have you taken them? Yeah, I remember that being my overriding thought that day. where are they? Because nobody said to me, oh, we've just taken the children into a classroom whilst you have this conversation. It was just, I assumed that someone had them, as in someone had taken them away at that point. The first thing I said to them are, where are my children? And they said, no, they're safe. They're in a classroom with a teacher. And then I said, right, what do you need me to do? So at no point can you really stop and think, oh my goodness, what is happening? Because they give you all these things that have to happen. So straight away, you've got to sort it out. And I remember getting a little bit feisty with them because another extra level to that day, it was Joel's 5th birthday.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, I'm there thinking, what, an hour? I'm about to get him, it's his birthday, he's having birthday tea. So I remember having a bit of back and forth with them about it being more than an hour. And I think the adrenaline obviously kicks in, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I kind of went, no, it can't be an hour. And they said, I think we agreed that by 7 o'clock, I think I staged a tiny protest saying,
it's not possible. It's just literally not possible.
Yeah. And then, so we agreed by 7 o'clock. And then they just let me go and said, oh.
Carry on with your life as if nothing had happened, sort of thing.
Yeah. Make sure you do it. We'll be checking that you do it. If you don't do it, we will come and take him from your house ourselves. And that was it. Off you trot.
So Darren could come home with you?
Well, then they wanted to talk to him. So they said, you have to go and find him somewhere to live. And I had to go get the children. And so I then, thankfully, my parents, they're not local. They were around because it was Joel's birthday. So I rang them saying, please, can you get the children? This has just happened. I need to find him somewhere to live. But they've been amazing. They've been amazing all the way through and just stepped into lots of gaps. And so they went.
That makes a huge difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, they've been amazing. And then Darren and he spoke to the police and he got in his car. I was on the phone trying to work out what to do. I ran to my friend's house who lives really near the school and I said, I need some help. And she was amazing. So she just said, okay, we can sort it out.
We're on it.
Yeah, she was great. She took control of the situation and we sorted out. We are Christians and we go to a church and she is at that church. So she was saying, we know lots of people, we can figure this out. We'll have it sorted. And she did. She took that off me, which was great.
Wow.
And then I ran back to the car.
When in crisis, the thing that enables you to survive is people around you who can support you and kind of, it feels like they almost physically held you up, like your mum and dad.
Absolutely, yeah. Like our community of friends, you find out very quickly, and particularly in this scenario, who is willing to come near to you and who are more likely to take 10
ostracize
steps back.
You.
Yeah, or just very politely leave you alone. I think it's tricky, isn't it? I guess you have to know somebody really well to say, we know this isn't true. We are here for you. Or to not be sure if it's true, but to still support me. You still have to be quite bold to take a step into our lives at that moment. But thankfully, so many people did that, which was amazing.
That says a lot about you and Darren there, doesn't it?
Hopefully. You think so?
Do you want to sort of tell the story so that we all understand what happened? And then let's look at the psychological kind of impact and where you all are now.
Sure. What happened then was it took about 8 weeks to interview Darren. So in that time we were in a lot of limbo and uncertainty. I could see him with the children as long as I was there the whole time, or somebody was there the whole time. It kicks off a lot of things when you're accused of an offence like this. So within the first week, social services visited. We had an emergency referral from them. They were at our door it happened on a Tuesday. They were in our house on the Thursday, assessing the situation. By all through that week, the teachers weren't told until the Thursday, but actually the gossip had just gone wild. Yeah, It was insane. And all this time, I still have to do the school run, which was, I think that is up there with one of the worst bits. Having to walk through that for the first 6 weeks in particular, with the children who are not deaf, nor are they stupid. We just, having to navigate that with the children was really, really difficult.
It feels like a real trauma, actually. I can see that you kind of scrunched up as you did that. It's like
you just want to hide.
Yeah, and it's like you had to walk through danger where you felt people were whispering about you, accusing you,
Openly.
Openly.
Yeah. They didn't hide it.
Like what? I mean,
well, I actually wrote down lots of things in that time because I think it was the only thing that I could do to process. And there's just a lot of, have you heard? He's been arrested for child porn. That's not what happened at all. That was the rumour at one point that I could hear. A lot of, have you heard what's happened? I think he's been arrested, and that kind of thing.
But also the have you heard what's happened sounds excited. It's like
there was a buzz.
And this is your husband, your life, your kids.
Yeah, and I think people just don't think through that. I don't think they think through that this is a person with a family, with a wife, with children. And most of the school community did know that I was there, that I was married to him, and that the Stamp children were there. It wasn't a secret, and they still did it, which I just, now looking back.
No.
Yeah, and just looking back, I just can't get my head around it. But I guess you become people's entertainment, don't you? That's the problem.
That makes me feel physically sick as you say that. Like your horror that you were going through is somebody else's entertainment.
Yeah, it was
horrifying.
Awful. It was awful. And for the children, because as a mother, you're trying to protect them, and you're in this scenario where you think, I can't protect them. But then at the same time, I was thinking, well, I can't whip them out because I've got to go to work. I'm
a single parent now.
Yeah, I've got to kind of carry on life in some form. Also, I couldn't leave them with Darren, so if I whipped them out, then that would be 24/7 me caring for them and trying to school them.
And if he's lost his job, you need to earn too. So there's just so many pressures.
Yeah, thankfully at that point he was suspended on full pay, so that was taken off as a little bit, which was good. Yeah, so all of that happened. Then Darren was interviewed, and then they said we're going to refer it to the CPS, and that was July, and then we didn't get a decision until the March. All the way through them.
That's 9. Is that 9 months?
Yeah, it was a really long time.
And so your life was completely kind of threatened and on hold, but also damaged.
Yeah.
For 9 months while they investigated.
Yes. And then we got, I think it was the 15th of March, got an email through to say they will be charging him with three counts of sexual assault of a child. Which felt really out of the blue not out of the blue, it just felt really surprising at that time, because he felt that in his interview he'd given quite a good account, explained how he teaches, because the accusations were meant to be in the middle of a classroom, in the middle of a field, in the middle, so he had to explain how those days have gone. And he felt that he had given quite a thorough account, and the solicitor felt like he'd given a good, thorough account of what goes on in a classroom. And that,
so there's one child accused him of sexual assault, accused him of what? Touching
her on the bottom. That's what she said happened. In the middle of a classroom, in the middle of a field, and with a kind of a fallout with another girl. But yeah, I think we were just under the illusion that it would all get sorted out. Yeah, you kind of think, let me explain to you how that happened. And I think you just under this kind of trust. Yeah, you trust that when you tell the truth, you give an account of something that it would
be believed,
be done. Yeah, maybe that was pretty naive. I don't know. And then so that charge decision came through.
Oh gosh, how horrifying!
Yeah, it was really horrifying. It was so surprising. He was just beside himself, shocked. And then what happens then is that you go to the magistrate's court if it's a Crown Court offence, which this is, you go to the magistrate court to plead, then they refer it to the Crown, and then they set a trial date. The courts are snowed under at the minute, which then meant that the court date was the following March. So it was then another year from charge decision until trial date.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I think it was in the June 2023 3, we knew that it would be March 2024. So we knew then that we were in it for the long, long, long haul. And it felt pretty long already. 9 months felt a long time. Yeah. And then we knew then that it would be another year and a bit from that point.
Let's go into what happened in that time afterwards. So just tell us, I can hardly bear to tell us what happened. So you waited with obviously a huge, which we'll go into, with a huge build-up of stress through that time. So tell us what happened in the court.
Yeah, okay, so the court case was 4 days long. The child, she gave her account. It had already been pre-recorded earlier, and then she had a friend that said she'd seen one of them happen. She hadn't, obviously, but she had a friend that said that. So they went, the Tuesday it started, they went through the prosecution evidence, which was very little because it's
one person's allegation.
Yeah, and then Darren had to give evidence on the next day, and his colleague gave evidence in his defence as well.
Who was there as well?
Yeah, he was there for the one of the charges was on the field, and he was there for that. So he had to give an account of how that can't have happened. What his account was actually matching Darren's, as you would expect when you tell him the truth. Yeah, and he was amazing actually, because they asked him about what is Darren like as a teacher, and he also is a parent of a child that was in Darren's class at the time. So he could give a really good account of what is this teacher like when you're the parent, what is this teacher like when you're his colleague. And he gave a really positive account of Darren, which was brilliant. And then the judge sums up, actually no, I think it does. The judge sums up first. So he gave he leads them through what you've got to decide.
And what the law is, sort of thing.
What the law is. And then the closing statement came from the prosecution, and then the closing statement came from our barrister, the defence, and then the jury were sent out. This was on a Thursday, and it was about 3:25, and they said to us, at 4:00 we have to send them home, so don't expect very much at this point, because 12 people have to get a coffee, they've got to appoint a foreman, don't panic, kind of thing. You won't get a judgment today. And then you have to go in every time the judge sends the jury home or brings them in, anything like that. And we had to go in. The judge said, right, we're all in here because I need to send you home. But he said, but actually, I've got 2 verdicts out of 3. Should we just do them now?
Wow.
What? So I was there like, what? What is going on here? And I think, what it sounds like is that they did a bit of a straw poll of the 3 charges. They were undecided on one because presumably they didn't have time to discuss it really much. And they came back with not guilty. We haven't decided not guilty of the third one.
God.
And then they said, okay, so you'll have to come back at 11 o'clock tomorrow because the judge had a case on. Come back at 11 for the third one. So by Thursday night, we knew that there was 2 not guilties and 1 yet to be decided, which was weird.
Yeah. So you were really kind of relieved, but also scared because I guess the one not decided could
be the one.
And
it was the one that when we came out, we all said it's trickier because it was the one that her friend had said that she'd seen, whereas the other 2, it was quite clear that it wasn't true. And then so we went back on the Friday at 11. They sent the jury out, and the judge said, back in here at 12:15, so you won't hear anything until then. And so we waited around, but the atmosphere was a bit more relaxed. I think because we got 2, I think we were kind of like, okay, we know what, we didn't know it would be not guilty, but we kind of knew what the process was at this point. And we knew we weren't going until 12:15. So it was a little bit more relaxed than the Thursday, which was just
your head was going to blow off.
Yeah. I think at one point on the second day, I said to my friend, I feel like every part of me is shaking, but there's shaking. And then I remember saying to her, the end of my fingers, even the flesh at the end of my fingertips is shaking. That's like my whole
every
body.
Millimeter in your body was shaking. Quaking. It's like to the end of your tips, like there wasn't anything in you that wasn't shaking. You were frightened at that level.
So tense. That's how intense it was. And when you sat there, you can't move because you're on a wooden bench. You can't fidget, you can't move. you can't show any emotion, you can't let anything out, and you just sat there.
So you have to look like a stone when you're completely kind of shaking inside. That's a big demand.
Yeah. And then watching Darren give his evidence the atmosphere was electric. It was like fizzing almost. Amazingly, lots of our friends came to support him. So I think there was about 20 of us in total, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And so it was just really nice to have people who loved him there with us.
Witnessing and being beside you, supporting you.
Yeah, and just kind of all willing him, all sat there supporting him, which was really nice.
What made it buzzing?
It was deadly silent. Nobody even moved a muscle. I think it was all of us in anticipation, hoping that it goes well. But alongside that, by that point, he had been accused publicly in a courtroom for 2 days. And this was his moment to tell the truth, say what happened, and defend himself. And I think we all felt that it'd been 2 years of him not being able to do that.
Yeah. Of being utterly silent, but also imprisoned in a way.
Yeah. And I think particularly because of all the gossip as well, I'd never been able to say anything. I'd never been able to defend him really. I'd kept very silent. And so it felt like we'd all been building up to this moment where he was there. And he did amazingly.
Because he must have been petrified. This was his life on the line.
Yeah.
His family on the line, his future on the line.
Everything on the line. Absolutely everything. And it was really difficult because they take you through who you are, who are you married to, who are your children. They take you through who you are as a person.
Looking for an underbelly, looking for your kind of dark side.
Yeah. And on the positive side, our barrister took him through who he was, but we could tell he was getting a little bit wobbly. You know, talking about your family and your children and everything, he was getting wobbly at that. And then later on, we could tell he was trying to hold in some anger because, well, the prosecutor, she's got to do her job, but she essentially was saying, "You are attracted to young children, aren't you? You have a thing about young girls." That was kind of her line. And you could tell he was getting
outraged.
And he kept on just saying, "I would never dream of that. That is not." But there was a point at which me and Darren's sister, we could tell that it was on the edge of him
like losing
and getting really angry. And you've got to hold all that in.
Yeah.
And we're all angry for him. There's just so much emotion that you're holding in your body at this point, thinking, okay, Darren, you can do this. And also being angry and also trying not to cry at them speaking about you and your children. Yeah. It was just so much. And I think that's why the atmosphere was like that, because we were all feeling the same. And so these 20 people sat there, and obviously there's the girl on the other side, and it was like nothing I've ever experienced and probably will never ever experience again. Hopefully never. But there's nothing even near it that I can describe really, but the emotion
so dramatic
in the room,
it is proper drama, isn't it?
And
terrifying,
and everybody's emotions
are on the edge.
And then so on the Friday, then we turned up on the Friday, go in, they dismissed the jury. The judge was coming back at 12:15 and our barrister came up to us and he said, "Unanimous verdict's in, let's go." But he doesn't know which way it's going to go, but I think he could at that point.
He felt a bit up, you could tell.
So we went in and then they said, "Not guilty." And they said, "Mr. Stamp, you're free to go." And you've never seen that man move so fast in all his life. We still laugh about it now. We've got quite a lot of dark humour. We've got several things that we giggle at now. But the man moved very fast out of that room. But then we had to sit there whilst the judge said, "Thank you for all your service. We really appreciate it." He was telling them about, "I'm really sorry you get rubbish coffee." He was like telling them. And I'm sat there, like, come on.
Come on, get me one. Yeah, I want to be with Darren.
Yeah. And he was waiting outside, and we were all sat there going, "Thank you, but we're not bothered about the coffee." Like, we get. And so he dismissed them, and then all of us were like, "Go." Went out
and flew into Darren.
Sobbed. I'm not really a crier, and I think 2 years of tears exited my body at that point.
Yeah.
Just, yeah. He kept on, I remember him saying, it's over. Yeah. So it was very quick actually in the end, which I'm very grateful for. So it's the waiting,
it's the system that kept you,
that
kind of held you in amber in a way.
In limbo for all that time.
In limbo. 2 years, really.
Yeah.
So is it over? I mean, what has been the cost for you? How is Darren? How is your family?
It's kind of over, but kind of not. So a not guilty verdict doesn't just trickle down and everything be fine. He still has to deal with the teaching regulator. He's still got to deal with them, and that's long again. You know, nothing's ever quick, is it? They kind of assess the situation and decide whether to ban you from teaching. So that's a bit...
Although he's been proved innocent.
Their bar apparently is a lot lower, the balance of probabilities. So you have to just go through all the motions. He's been through a school one, but they found there was no substance to the allegations. But he had to go again, read out why he wasn't guilty, read out his response. That's what he had to do, response to the allegations. He had to go through all that again. I imagine it might happen again with the teacher regulator. So it's
he's
over,
still not
but
working.
It's not.
He's
no,
not
still
working.
Not working. No. Still not working.
But he's living with you. He's back at home.
Yeah. Straight away after the verdict, he was allowed home, which is great. Yeah, that was the big one. But it's not really normal for any of us because our normal was him going to work, and
he's still being paid.
He is still being paid, yes, which is good. Yeah, he's all right. It's a tricky one, isn't it?
He must be so angry.
You want to move on. Yeah, you want to. It's strange. You want to move on, but also you've got a lot to recover from. And nothing can be recovered quickly, is what we've learnt.
What do you mean? Say more about that.
I think we felt naively that when it was over, we could be like, great, let's go, let's move on. But it's not that easy. There's just a lot of trauma that everybody has to deal with. Thankfully, our youngest, Joel, he is blissfully unaware of a lot of it. He says...
How old is he?
He's now 6.
So he was 4 or 3?
Yeah, it was his 5th birthday. Yeah, so he was turned 5 that day. And so he's nearly 7 now. He's 7 in June. He's said a few things that show that he's unaware, but also the rest of us realise it's significant. So the first couple of days, he said, he went into school and he said to his friend, do you know something weird happened?
Did you move school? The children moved school, did they?
No, they haven't moved school. Basically... the staff in school was so supportive of Darren and so supportive of my children that actually, bizarrely, the best thing was to do to stay.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I'm so
and
pleased.
Our middle child, actually, he's adopted. And so we didn't want to add
another disruption.
To another change. Yeah. And he's really, really settled in school. So I took the decision to probably just leave them there, decide at a later date, but actually I think I will keep them there. Yeah, the staff have been amazing, and actually one good thing from Darren working there and the children going there is that these people felt my pain literally because they knew him and they knew that it wasn't true, and they received our children so well each day, knowing what they were going through. Whereas I think if they'd been at a different school and they didn't know Darren,
there could have been a whiff of the drama again. There could have been that thing of did he, didn't he? And
exactly.
Yeah.
And I guess if you don't know him and you weren't sure, you'd think, oh, these children have been through some trauma. But the teachers are thinking, we know him. We know this family. We know this man. He's our colleague. He's been our colleague for nearly a decade.
There's no way.
There's no way, and these are his children, and we're going to do our best to look after them as best as humanly possible. I said they did all get amazing care when they went to school. Once we got in the door.
The older children, I imagine they have a lot of trauma, so that you told them the truth all the time. I mean, what you said, you wanted to protect them, but also
Poppy, she was in year 6 at the time, so she heard a lot of it. So on maybe the first week, she said to me, Mum, can you just tell me everything as we go along? Can you tell me the truth? And then we can just talk to each other. I said, yes. And we did.
So mature. Yeah.
Yeah. Me and her, we've got a funny relationship now because we talked about things and we didn't tell Darren because we didn't really want to make him even more distressed. So we're learning now, the two of us, that we don't have to be kind of a secret club that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
We're learning now that we can say things freely, but it takes time. Takes a bit of time. And I'm really glad that that's how we ended up, that it wasn't fractious between us, and that we were like the people that knew things that nobody else knew. But we are learning now to open up a little bit more. Declan, the middle one, he didn't know who made the allegation, but he knew bits about it. I try to keep it to a minimum with him because he is an external processor. And I feel like his class would probably have known if I told him too much. So you've got to balance that out. And actually his teachers have been amazing at keeping everything quiet. He didn't hear much gossip.
So they protected him?
They protected him a lot.
And is the accusing child still in the school?
No, she was old enough to have left last year. So I've had from September onwards, she's not been in school, which is good.
How do you feel about her?
I think that it was a lie that got out of hand, and I think children don't quite realise the impact of what they say and the effect of how that can damage somebody's life. I don't have any ill feeling towards her, actually. No. I feel sorry for her. I know that at 10, 11, that if I said something that wasn't true, that I don't think I would realise how that ends up. I don't think I don't think many of the adults at the start who were chatting about it knew that Darren had been removed from the family home. They won't have known that. They won't know that we would have been here for 2 years. People just don't realise. I mean, I wouldn't have known before this. I would have no idea. So I try to give people... I try to give people grace.
Yeah, you've been giving them grace.
Yeah, because...
Hating is exhausting and contaminating, isn't it?
I do not want to be, in 5 years' time, bitter. I don't want that. I don't want that for any of us. And I've said that to my children. I do not want us to end up angry and bitter. So let's try to do what we can. My eldest puppy, I got her quite a lot of help after. So she was in year 6 and it was the last 6 weeks of her school life. And she had a lot of loss in that time because Darren couldn't come to anything. He couldn't come to her school leavers stuff. He couldn't come to their play and all that kind of stuff. And he couldn't come. But also at that time, people were still gossiping. So when she left and went to high school in the October, November, she was really struggling. And I think that was kind of the leftover from that 6 weeks of trauma. But she's doing amazingly now. She's loving school. She's got a really nice set of friends who she told, when it was the trial week, she told them about it. And then when I went to collect her and told her, she texted them all saying, "I've not disappeared. My mum's picked me up from school." Kind of all that. Oh. My dad's been cleared and I'm going home to go find him. Yeah. So that was really nice, and she's doing really well. Declan, all right, actually. He has spurts of really being angry and takes it out on us, but we are getting there with it.
So given that this is a kind of unbearable challenge in some ways, where your whole life and your children's lives, the man you love's life is threatened, what was the worst part for you? And also, what have you learned?
The worst part, I think, was the lack of control, because I am quite a fixer. I'm just one of those people, I'm the type of person that if anybody needs anything, it's usually me that will help them sort it out, that kind of person. And when everything is taken off you and nothing is in your control, and the consequence of that could be that your husband is in prison for something that he didn't do. I think that was the hardest bit.
What did that do to you? Did it mean you couldn't sleep? Did it mean you lost your temper? I mean, what?
I don't think I've slept. I don't think I've slept for 2 years, to be honest. Still not really come back yet.
So you still don't feel safe?
No. And there's very small things that happen that make my heart rate go up, and it can be not very much. really.
So you're still on high alert, aren't you? You're still kind of...
Yeah.
So what did help you, given that you like control? What are the things that enabled you actually not to go insane? Did you find
My
coping
friends,
mechanisms? Yeah.
my friends
People,
were
connection.
people. Yeah, they were just amazing. And people who were very willing very quickly to say, Darren didn't do this. And they became my tribe, really. And the
The
barrister,
validation, the support that you weren't
yeah,
alone. That
yeah. And the barrister was joking during the trial. He called them Darren's entourage because he said, not many people have this many people supporting them. And he said, not many people will have people supporting them given the crime that you're accused
because
of.
it's so shameful and so kind of toxic, isn't it?
Yeah. So that really helped very quickly that they were saying, this is rubbish. It's absolutely not true. And they've just been great at encouraging me to say how I feel. That wasn't something that I was great at before.
No.
Like,
So
I'm a
what
lot
you've
better.
learned is that you've learned how to say how you feel and that helps you.
Yeah, I think so. I think...
You don't sound convinced.
I think it's still a learning curve. I think it feels just very vulnerable to say I'm in the dark depths of fear. But I think what I've learnt is when your friends say, we are too, but we are with you, and we are all scared, but we are scared with you together, that's what made a difference, I think.
Yeah.
Because then you don't feel on your own. You don't feel like I'm just sat here on my own thinking my life is completely decimated. They came and said, it is, but we are with you, and we are with you the whole way, to the point where there have been some days where internally I've thought, can you all leave me alone? They drop off meals, my freezer was being filled. I walk in, there's flowers. I'm just looking at in my kitchen now, there's 3 lots of flowers, bags of stuff, dinner in the freezer.
You're
that
really
people have
loved.
put in. Yeah, we are really loved. And that, I think that might be what I've learned. As I keep saying to people, I didn't realise how loved we were until this. And
I guess your feeling of love for them must have grown
absolutely.
enormously.
I was so shocked that people were willing to take a week's annual leave to come to a trial of their friend and just say, we're here with you, we're here, whatever you need, we're here. Yeah. And being here with us. And there's a lady at church who, when she found out, she said, what is the worst part of your week practically? And there was, on a Thursday, I do swimming lessons and piano lesson with Poppy. And I was having to take everybody with me because that's what you've got to do when you can't leave them with the other parent. So I was getting all 3 of them in the car, going to swimming lesson, getting them changed, all that palaver, sitting there through the swimming lesson, everybody out, everybody in the car, all that kind of stuff. And she said, on Thursday, I'll be at your house. I will pick up Declan. I'll take him to his swimming lesson. I will drop him back off. I will pick Poppy up and take her to her piano lesson, and I will drop her back off, and I will do that every Thursday for as long as you need me to. I'll see you then. And that's what she did. She just took it off me and just said, I will do that for you. Yeah, you stay where you are. I'm going to do that for you. And actually the highlight has been that she has got to know my children.
So they love her.
They love her. They call her their friend. When it was one of their birthdays, they said, well, when it's my birthday, please can we have Anne to come for tea because she's our friend? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So we have got
a new family member almost.
Yeah. We've made a new friend who knew us a little bit, but now is a friend. Just people are amazing. People do things for you that you would never, ever imagine they would do for you in a scenario. So you see the best of people. You do see the worst.
In the worst.
Yeah. And I felt like at the start, I just saw the worst of people the whole time and heard what they had to say and was like a celeb in all the... Yeah, well, I was like a celebrity, but not in a good way.
No.
But actually coming out the other side, we've just seen the best of people, and what people are willing to do for us is a lot.
And it's a lesson that we can all learn, isn't it? That if we have a friend who is in real straits, that we want to be that friend. We want to not just send a text, we actually want to show up and do things.
Yeah.
and be the person that takes a week off, or be the person that does the swimming and the piano, or because it is loving isn't just a feeling, it is a verb, isn't it? It's like, I'm going to do this.
Not to just say, what do you need? Or let me know if I can help. That is one thing. But for somebody to say, tell me what is your worst part of the week, was just the best question. And people will say, kind of the week of the trial, what are you doing for your dinner? Can we make you dinner? And there was a rota that went round, people, my spare key under my mat, and whenever we got back each day from the trial, dinner was made for us. You just think it's things like that. It's not just saying,
no, tell me what you need.
Let me know if you need anything.
Yeah. And that's often what people do, but it's actually being a step ahead of that and thinking for you, and you're rarely able to kind of function and think for yourself.
Yeah.
And stepping in. I guess the thing, I mean, we haven't got very long, but the thing I'm left with is it's over, but it's not over. And this, that you're still not sleeping, and this still sense of threat in your body. And we don't have time to really kind of unpack that. But I think there's a really important psychological phase of recognizing that your adjustment is like you get into threat and the fear very, very fast. But the stepping out of being threatened and accused, and your body and your being knowing that you are now safe, when you, in that nanosecond, your life was kind of, as you said, had a bomb dropped on it, is a long, slow process, but it's also an active one. You can't just breathe in and out and think you're going to feel safe. I think there is psychological work. So I don't know if you have therapy now, family therapy.
Yeah.
You know, because you've got trauma in your body. I could see it when you remember walking through to the school.
Yeah, I have got some books. I've had a bit during it, and then when we got to the end of the trial, my very wise friend who is a GP said, I'm not going to let you carry on with your life without getting therapy. I'm going to ask you if you've booked it in, and I'm going to be really annoying.
Good for you. Another way of loving you.
Yeah, so every week she just asks me, and I have got it booked in, so that's good. I've done as I am told. I felt like if I start it, I will be in there and I won't be able to function after. But actually, when I went, that wasn't the case. It was all right. I think that was my fear, was at the time, because I was functioning, I had to be the one.
And you had to be defended. Yeah.
Yeah, I was the parent. I was the only caregiver. I was the wife that was keeping him going. If I break, we're all done for. And I think I felt that if I went for therapy, that would be something that
Pandora's
would make me
box. Like, if I start crying, I'll never stop crying.
Actually, I found it was really helpful. Yeah.
Surprise, surprise.
I know, what a surprise.
Who the hell knew that?
I know, people say it and they were right.
I know.
I think I thought this is going to cause a whole breakdown. I'm not going to be able to function. But she's been great at just dealing with little bits of it.
So there's a long way to go.
Definitely. And there's a lot that I buried that I didn't realise until the trial. There was one chat about maybe they could have me as a defence witness because of the diary entries that I put in showed that there was tons of gossip. They were trying to say, like, this atmosphere was wild and that's why children were talking. But I got it. I got the diary entry and read it. And I said to Darren, the first time that we're having this conversation will be on the stand. That's not going to go well. And I need to have this conversation in a therapy room. This cannot be the only time that we have this chat. I can't talk to a barrister in a courtroom full of people when I've buried it until now. So I've been very aware that since then that there's actually a lot of things that I experienced, particularly in the first 6 weeks, that I've not forgotten. I felt like
you had to bury it.
Yeah, you just have to get on, don't you? You have no choice. So I think this is going to be the time now where things will kind of come out from being pushed down.
And Darren, I mean, he must need a lot of therapy.
Yeah. He went for some at the midpoint between charge and trial, but he said, I felt a bit like there was nothing we could do because, and there's nothing that they kind of could say apart from,
because there was this doom thing coming towards him, the threat.
Yeah. Whereas now I think he's feeling like, okay, there's a lot to process and I need to talk that through. There's a lot.
There is a lot. And I mean, I feel like I really have heard what you've been through and what you've learned, and also that it isn't over and that there will be a whole lot of processing. What led you to write to us and want to get people to hear this? What was that?
I realised that there is very, very little support for families like us. I spoke to the social worker right at the beginning and said, where can we go for these children? I know that there are hundreds of people a month in this scenario that go through this, whether they're guilty or not guilty, but whose one day their parent gets ripped from their family home and not able to come back. Where is that? And she said, I don't think there is any that I know of. But she gave me 7 or 8 numbers to try, kind of like Child Action Northwest, people like that. And I rang them and they all said the same thing, which was, you are not the victim. Your children are not officially the victim in a criminal case. And therefore, we can't do anything to help you. And so I actually wrote to my MP to say, can we have a conversation someday about how there's no support for children like us? I had 3 points actually. I said, number 1, at the point of which your partner is arrested, some information would be helpful. I had no leaflet and nothing. They just told me he had to leave. I had to sort out accommodation. And then that was it. I didn't know what the next part was, nothing. But that was the first one. The second one was, can we hurry up charging decisions for people who have been taken out of their family home? And then number 3,
can they have a I can't think of the word, a sort of fast track? Can they have a fast track?
And then third, support for children in this scenario, because they're in our area, there doesn't appear to be any kind of specific support for them. So that was my main reason, really. I was thinking there will be so many other people in this scenario and there doesn't appear to be any support
or acknowledgement.
No, you kind of hidden.
And your MP's response?
Yeah, he was great. He has written to the Home Secretary, I think, is what he's done, to ask. And when the charging decision was taking ages, he contacted them to ask them where they were up to. I think I contacted him around month 7 and said, we've not heard anything at all. Why are we waiting so long? And he said he was going to give them a nudge. And I think he did, because then the charging decision came pretty quickly after that.
Gosh.
So he has been very helpful.
Oh, good.
But you just think there must be hundreds of people like me, maybe not with the teacher thing, but with anything else there will be. We're kind of hidden, really. Nobody really talks about this side of this crime.
And that feels what's important about this podcast, actually, is that we give people voice who'd never get heard. And your story and what you've just said and the whole story feels so important to be heard, because I've never thought about someone in your situation. I kind of look at, when there's a prosecution and you kind of see bad people, but you don't see people accused who then, you see sometimes in the papers. So I'm really moved by your courage, and I feel so much for what you've been through, and I really want to acknowledge what serious damage that has caused your family, psychologically, in every possible way.
Yeah.
But also to kind of acknowledge how you did find within yourself a capacity to keep going, to love Darren, and to be loved enough that you had this whole, what did you call them?
Entourage.
No, wasn't there a Darren fan club or
the fan club? Yeah.
The fan club.
Yeah.
And I hope that there's that love that you've been given and shown, you've managed to hold inside, that is going to be part of your recovery, that you kind of fully install how you're seen and how you're loved, and that becomes a reciprocal. I'm sure you're very loving with them because you're so enormously grateful, but I hope that is part of your recovery. But it'll be a long haul.
It will be a long haul. Yeah, I think we will get there. I'm pretty confident we will.
Yeah, you have hope. You've had hope all along, haven't you?
Yeah. And I think we've stuck together so well that's really helped. It's not fractured us apart.
You and Darren,
and the 5 of us all together.
Do you feel closer to Darren?
Yeah, I do. I feel like when you go through something catastrophic, it can go either way, can't it?
Yeah.
But we've very much been a we rather than an I and him, which is good. He laughs because I used to say our defence. I wasn't accused of anything, but it very much felt like a team effort. Yeah. And the barrister said the same. He said, Darren, you are the most prepared defendant, but I think a lot of that is your team effort is every detail. I did what I could with the evidence to pick it apart on his behalf when he didn't have the energy. So it's been definitely a team rather than fractious, which is good.
Well, you really know how to love, Esther, and I guess that is your superpower. It is the love that you have for your children, for your friends, but in particular in this case with Darren, that has enabled you to survive such a catastrophic event, really.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just hope for other people that it gives them a little bit of hope that there is an end when they're in the middle of such a long process. It feels like it will never, ever, ever, ever end, but it will. It does end. It does end eventually.
It does.
You've got to hold on, hang on.
And do what you can while you're holding on to get lifted, because you can't hold on alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Esther.
Yeah, it's been really nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too. Hi, Emily. It's just us two today, and we're talking about Esther Stamp's conversation with me. And to be honest, I've never had a conversation with someone like that, because I've read these sorts of stories in the newspapers, but I've never really heard what it's like on the inside to go through a process or a kind of series of devastating events like that. And so much came up for me, but I wonder what came up for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of similarly, the first thing was really around her bravery to speak out, because I think issues to do with anything sexual between an adult and a child, there's so much shame around that it's very, very difficult to speak about, even if as in this case, it was obviously proved completely innocent. And I thought she had so much courage to talk of her experience using her own name. She didn't, do it anonymously.
It was anonymous.
Which, would also have been taken a lot of courage. And I firstly thought, I'm sure that she is helping many, many others who are facing equivalent situations. And I also thought that I wondered if there was something about having a voice now when her and Darren weren't able to speak for themselves for almost 2 years. And
2 years.
Yeah. And the power, I think, of being able to say your side of the story, whatever your situation is, I think is really essential in beginning to kind of claw back some sense of agency. Because when something really big happens, whether it's this, whatever it is that happens that kind of pulls the rug from under you, one of the things that you lose is a sense of your own agency, because your world has basically been turned upside down to do with something that was nothing to do with you, that you could never have predicted, that was completely out of your control.
And that out of the blueness, that like going to school on an ordinary day on her son's 5th birthday, and then being stopped by her headmaster, the sort of out of a clear blue sky catastrophe. I couldn't get over the shock of that, really. I still feel shocked at that.
Yeah, like it's sort of like that heart freeze thing. A bit like, when you get a sort of phone call and you're like, oh, this is about your son or your thing, and you're like, your whole body just freezes until they're like, oh, just to let you know you've got his wellies or whatever it is. And this was sort of the opposite, the freeze, and then the devastating truth that it wasn't something one of her children had done. It was this accusation. What also really struck me was just the sort of total faith in him, that she didn't have any doubts. And I think that was really extraordinary. I also think, because this was sort of talking more generally, I think it's really human to hold both. That if you have a situation that's not necessarily identical, but where you're with somebody and, I don't know, something happens, or you find out that they've been accused of something not okay, I think it is possible to believe the person that you love and not be able to imagine that they could do anything like this, and have a corner of your mind where you doubt, where you wonder. And I think uncertainty, like, it's a really agonizing part of being human.
And just to that, it felt, and I've had this with other people with other kind of situations which aren't the same, but where the partner they love have been accused of something, and you can actually think that the partner has done something wrong and also still love them, and also be confused as to, do I want to continue to be with this person? Or, because not being with them cost me a lot, my home, the family for my kids, and that kind of dilemma, where part of what is influencing what I'm saying is that the narrative, like, she became people's entertainment, but also the narrative around public figures when something happens and they're kind of seen in a negative way, is that we all have such strong opinions. Like, why did she stay with him? Or why did he stay with her? Or he's all bad. And I think what you brought up for me in the holding both, and we often bring this in the podcast, that two things can be true, two feelings can be true.
Loads of feelings.
Loads of competing feelings. Yeah. And that the complexity of holding so much when you're so judged by other people, and maintaining her integrity in this case, but for other people, if they have been through something similar, how do you hold on to yourself and what you trust when you feel so judged and you feel like you're other people's entertainment?
Absolutely. And I think when you're really confused, you sort of lose, it's very easy to lose sight of even really knowing what you do, like, that you sort of confuse yourself in a way, like, how can I even trust myself, because there are so many other strong opinions. And it doesn't sound like a dilemma for her, but I imagine it is a dilemma for lots of people, to kind of even lose a sense of your own instinct, of your own sort of self-knowledge. And it also, you mentioned it there, Mum, of these sort of public figures. It brought up for me too the sort of cancel culture that we live in.
Yes, that's good.
And how I really believe that in the biggest picture sense, that it's motivated by something good intentioned, that the overall goal is to make society a more human place, a more inclusive place, a place where people can't go around behaving in appalling ways, which is all a positive. But there are also obviously kind of risks and damage to real people's lives that we've seen with public figures, that was true in this case, that kind of go along with that. And I just wondered what you thought about it.
Well, I think it's very, what we're kind of, the cancel culture is not nuanced. It is incredibly black and white. It's all bad or all good. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you that we need to call things out that we've accepted for much too long, and that needs to be kind of named. I don't know about the shaming, named and shamed, I don't really agree with.
And I think there's something about this sort of speed of it, right? Like, that someone gets accused of something, suddenly it's everywhere. There's no pause. There's no pause button or like reflection button, because it's like kind of like a frenzy, and we kind of feed off it.
But also I think there's this sort of terrible phrase that when people are found not guilty, having waited maybe 2 years like this, and that whole thing of being imprisoned in limbo, and that's what it felt like. It felt like with Esther and anyone going through something similar, while you're waiting for the decision from the CPS, or while you're waiting for the court date, you are actually in a prison, but it's a limbo prison where you can't move forward or move back. And that is a really appalling thing. But whilst you're in the prison, and then you get found innocent, there's something about your reputation that remains tarnished, because there's this awful expression, there's no smoke without fire. And so that although Darren was completely innocent, I think he probably feels damaged in the way, like, I'm not seen the same, I'm not trusted like I was, and I don't know that I can even let myself feel trusted like I did. But also there's this kind of reputational damage that is really hard to come back from.
Yeah. And I suppose the sort of powerlessness of that experience of not being able to control what you think other people think about you or are imagining about you, and you imagining what they're imagining about you. Like, I think it's torture. Real and very torture. There's something that sort of feels very like squirmy, like like sort of someone sort of cut you open and said, you're bad. Like, we can see what's inside and it's bad. And there's nothing that you can say to show them otherwise. And I wonder like how you support yourself if that's a situation that you're in for whatever reason, not necessarily this reason.
When I was listening back to Esther, and I wish I'd noticed this at the time when we were speaking, there's a wonderful kind of goldenness to her energy that is kind of shiny when she gets excited, saying when the good things happen, or when she's talking about her children.
And the laugh, she's got a lovely laugh.
And the laugh. And I wish I'd asked her about her faith, because it was her community, her neighbour, that amazing neighbour who took the children to ballet and to swimming. I love that neighbour, and they formed a relationship. But also, the Darren fans who came to court, who took time off work. And I think most of them came from her church community. But also research shows that having faith, people tend to be more robust, certainly in response to grief, which is obviously what I know more about than other things. And I wonder if her faith was part of her resilience and her ability to just maintain herself and keep going. Just the other thing I was thinking about having faith that may contribute to Esther's resilience is that if you have faith, my assumption is that to some extent you surrender to a higher power and you kind of believe, you don't always try and kind of knuckle down control for yourself. So you kind of believe in the good that isn't within your gift, that is within your faith and what you believe. And I wonder if that was part of what Esther was able to call on in order to remain so robust.
Yeah, it sort of gives you maybe guidance and a sense of like maybe there's a bigger meaning or a bigger challenge that you've been given, but if you sort of hold on to your faith, you can get through it. That if you don't have that, which I think most people don't in the UK anyway, there's sort of less to hold on to maybe. And I agree, that amazing woman who took them to the piano and took them to swimming, you did sort of feel, as I was listening to her, it's sort of a crisis that kind of exposed the best and worst of human nature. Like there's this sort of buzzing, locusty sort of thrill, gossip of when it happened, but also the people that stuck by her, the people that really made a difference. I mean, I'd love to be that person. That I was thinking that I probably wouldn't, but what an amazing thing to like be able to give something really practical, but actually really emotional too, in being able to provide what somebody actually needed.
And if there's one thread that runs through every single one of our podcasts when people are facing big challenges, and I say it every time, it is the people around them who stand by them, who help them, with flowers or lasagna or helping children or just being there, who show up, that do enable them to get through the hardest things. And it is the love of others.
I saw this lovely thing the other day. I can't remember where I saw it, or maybe someone told me. But someone had just experienced a bereavement or a divorce. It was a sort of crisis situation. A loss. And they just sort of sent her a text with like 5 different options of like, this week, would you like me to go to Sainsbury's and pick up groceries?
Your shop.
Number 2, DoorDash delivery. Number 3, look after your kids for a couple of hours. Number 4, I select none of the above, but I'm open to choosing them at a future date or something. And it just felt like, what a lovely practical way, no pressure, saying like, these are the things that I can do.
I had one more question, Em, which is wondering about the children and the 3 children and the middle one that was adopted. And was there anything you would add about that? I mean, they were told the truth.
I think, I just think it was a beautiful example of how to try and hold children in a really complicated situation, and that they were kind of held by the community as well. I imagine that was really helpful, although complicated and difficult, because I think it sounded like what she did was tell them the truth, but also tailor it to each of their developmental ages, their needs, in the context of their own sort of individual history. Obviously, the eldest sort of wanted to know everything, and that was what she needed. Whereas the middle one gosh, that was so hard to hear, that he's adopted, and that sort of, so he's already experienced this sort of insecurity, a loss, a sense of things can happen, and sort of fundamental attack, like there's already been attachment damage, however that adoption took place. And then to have your dad suddenly not there for a really difficult reason. So really that was like hard to hear. And I think, the extraordinary thing is that there doesn't seem to be any resources for families of a parent that has been accused but not convicted. So there are resources out there for children who have a parent that is incarcerated, and for the victims, but also for children whose parents have been convicted, so that they've been found guilty, they're, serving their sentence. There are resources, but for this large group of people, because the legal process is slow, of where you're sort of in limbo, and no one has said this person has been found guilty, and yet you're going through this awful limbo. There doesn't seem to be any resources out there, which is completely shocking. And it's also sounded like she really did her best. The other thing that really helps children in this situation, obviously talking to them, being truthful within like a age appropriate level, sensitive, allowing them to feel how they feel, but also keep everything else as much as the routine as is possible. So keeping the routines of school, the routines of piano, the routines of swimming, which is obviously a massive juggle when she was suddenly a single parent. But if you're sort of able to, the things that sort of help children feel safe, the more you can do of those.
Yeah. And that was just to add in that was the big reason for wanting to be a voice on our podcast, was raising awareness there's no support, and that her MP, it did sound like he kind of raised it too. And it's something that we want people to think about in the organisations, that there is the accused who is in limbo, who is then found innocent, and they get no support at all. And that is truly shocking.
The other thing for the children is also around whatever your child has experienced, but when they've experienced something traumatic, what they also need is a narrative of this really scary thing happened, talking about the scary thing, talking about what that experience might have been like for the child, so that you're sort of labeling an affect, and then also talking about the ways in which those children were always kept safe, and the ways in which there was people supporting them, so that you're also you're creating a narrative but building a kind of foundation of safety within that
around them, that holds them,
that you sort of name it, but you're also naming that people. They were always safe, they always had someone to look after them, they were never in danger, in the context of it being really awful not seeing daddy, it being scary, all the feelings that belong with that.
I think that's really, really helpful. And my final thought, and I'd love people listening to kind of give us their thoughts on this too, is that she said naively that they would just sort of bounce back and life would go back to normal. But when you've been through something like that, that isn't the case. And Darren still has to go through a whole kind of education thing, but also whether he can dare trust to teach again, which was his, big vocation. And that as a family, it takes a long time to rebuild safety in life when you've had this sort of bomb thrown onto your family.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely true, that there's almost like a magical thinking of like, oh, now he's proved innocent, we'll be back to where we were before. But when a trauma happens, that's one of the most difficult things about it, is that it can't be undone. It doesn't mean that you can't continue life and have joy and all the things you'd want in life, but it can't be sort of extricated. It's going to shape the future. And I guess it's sort of like what you say, Mum, about a bereavement, is that you kind of build around it, that becomes part of the narrative, as opposed to being able to kind of go back to where you were before. You can't go back to where you were before. And so to sort of give yourself grace in that process.
That was so beautifully said. Thank you very much. And thank you, Esther, and your family for coming forward with this story. And I'm sure it will really help lots of people listening in the different ways that they go through their lives and their own challenges. And thank you all for listening. And do, as ever, rate and review, and share this recording if you think it's helpful to someone. And stay in touch.